What is up, everyone? Welcome to the 10th episode of the Mechs on Deck talk show. Today, we have something very special for you. Chewy and I are obviously together in the same room. This is not fancy post-production. We are, well, as he caresses me.
Touchable. Tangible. Keyboard's all about feels.
Yeah, we are inside of Chewy and Oily Josh's office inside the Millennium Falcon.
We'll call it that. Here, I got a little Chewy.
A little Chewy.
Right here.
Little Chewy, making part of the set. Today, what are we going over?
We're going to be talking about Hotswap versus non-Hotswap, custom, normal, just the differences between the two. The Hotswap PCBs versus a custom PCB or a solderable or requires solder PCB, and benefits to both. There has been a big push and uprising, if you will, with the Hotswap builds. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome.
So yeah, we wanted to do something a little special for the 10th episode. Thank you guys for supporting us, by the way. So that's why we decided every now and then we'll get together, do something fun, do something special. And I'm actually going to be, at the time of recording this, I will be working on this board and changing it to something different. But I'm going to be going over, I'm going to actually uninstall switches from this board while we shoot this episode.
He's got to prepare for a stream that he's got tomorrow. If you haven't yet, follow us on Twitch. Every Wednesday, we stream. We're going to start streaming more. Every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time is when we go live consistently. Outside of that, we're planning on doing maybe some gaming. Little keyboard chores. We're going to do some desoldering streams and rebuild streams, stuff like that, and maybe build streams as we get boards in.
I was talking to Gio last night, and I was like, man, you can't be a good content creator when it comes to keyboards if you're bad at Overwatch. So this could be my signing off, being that bad at Overwatch. But no. So yeah, the first thing basically is what a PCB. That's what gets. We've talked about it before, but really quick, a PCB is basically what the switches go into and what the USB cable that goes into your computer plugs into to send any information that you put into it. It is a printed circuit board, if I'm not mistaken.
That is what it stands for, printed circuit board.
And so, typically they come, the standard one, they don't come with a Hotswap, but my timing was almost flawless. A Hotswap, just breaking stuff, no worries. A Hotswap has Hotswap sockets on the back. So I don't know if you can kind of see this, but they're basically these little Hotswap sockets. These are produced by Kale. And what you're able to do is just push the switch in, which can be very convenient. So,
yeah, it's super convenient if you're someone who's newer to building keyboards, or say you want a board where you can try out switches. Say
you got your switch tester already, and you decided, hey, I like this one switch, might as well try it, but I don't want to commit, don't want to ruin those pins because you were smart and you bought a switch tester first.
Yeah, or you want to get, have almost a tester board where you can test out multiple switches or different variants of switches if you're trying to swap out springs and whatnot and see which ones you like. Hotswap is a great thing to have. It's almost like a utility for a lot of people, but it's a great way to get started. So speaking of getting started, where did the kind of Hotswap craze kind of start at?
So now I'll be honest, I do not know the exact first board that did it. But one that I remember at least seeing that was kind of one of the first big ones was the Rama M60, when they said that they were going to start doing a Hotswap variant keyboard after their successful M65A. So the M60A was offered with Hotswap. But I would say when it kind of became more normalized and more brought into the community to where it's great for Hotswap, but when you're spending that much, a newcomer might not want to spend that much. I would say the Tofu kind of really brought that into kind of the limelight, and got people going, oh wow, like, that's something that I can do, I can afford, I can build it. I don't have to buy all these things. So that's kind of when it started, I would say, is whenever the Tofu came out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where I saw the craze really get started. I know they were present before that. I know there was some support with different boards, because I feel like at the beginning I saw a couple where it had the support for the sockets, but they didn't come pre-installed. Because I remember there was a lot of places you get it. I know specifically Novel Keys sold them, and they still sell the sockets to this day. But I remember seeing that, a little over a year ago. I think when we were looking at buying your first,
my first big boy board.
Yeah,
not even big boy board. Let's be honest.
Which is that was what, 2 years ago now, almost.
Year and a half. Ish. So, time's a fickle thing. So, but yeah, we'll kind of get into the benefits now, which the first main benefit to me personally, as someone, this isn't as much towards like a starter or someone starting out, but time. I have a Tofu that I love. Right now it's got the T1 switches in, hard rip. But it's got the T1 switches in them right now. But I love that I can have almost a new keyboard in about half an hour. Just popping out the switches, throwing in new switches, and boom, I can go from a linear to a clicky to a tactile, all in 3 days with only actually doing about an hour and a half of work, which is, an hour and a half can be about how much time you build a normal board. So,
yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows, and especially I think Dixie Mech at this point, if anyone who's watching, he did a rebuild of his Tiffany M65A. I think he had an issue with his PCB, so he had to swap the PCB out, and he was having quite a rough time at first getting all those the Telios desoldered. Desoldering a regular board is basically, regardless of what kind of gear you have, it's not fun. There's always a downside to it. It's not like where soldering gets better as you get a nicer iron and stuff like that. It pretty much sucks no matter what you're doing. But the time that you save on just Hotswap, being able to just get a puller and just pull them out is amazing.
Amazing. If you're curious, this is an IC puller. So if you are, for the newcomers, if you are curious, something you can get, this is a switch puller on Amazon. It's an IC puller. You can get them for about $6 shipped, and you're able to just kind of pop them out. It's fantastic. So
yeah, we'll put a link down in the description so you can take a look at that guy and get one for yourself. It's useful to have as well because you can also help use it to take switch tops off. If your PCB supports switch top removal, you can use that, or your plate, not PCB, but your plate supports switch top removal. You can help use this to get those tops off and do some adjustments. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, next thing is kind of they don't fail as often in terms of like user caused fail. I think if you're using a solder board, there's a lot of people who have issues, especially if they're desoldering and soldering it, where they lift a pad or something and they end up, making a mistake. They leave the iron on the pad for too long and it ruins it. You accidentally touch the solder in the wrong place and you just fry the controller.
You drop your soldering iron on top of your PCB. I have not done that yet, but I'm sure I will now that I've said it. But yeah, it's a lot of less moving parts. One can even argue it's safer. You don't have to worry about hot irons burning yourself.
You're not dealing with something that's like 600 degrees plus that's gonna damage you or the things around you and ruin your table.
Yeah. So, and it's I think one of the last thing is beginners. We talked about it for a second about not for the kind of already initiated people in the community, and about being able to swap out a board, kind of a tester board. I always talk about my tofu as my tester board, but it's amazing for beginners because when you decide you want to get into the community and you go, man, I'm gonna have to spend like $200 on a keyboard, and you go, whoa, time out. Actually, you need like $50 worth of gear on top of that just to be able to do that. And that's not something that that can, we talk a lot about experience, and that can ruin that when you're going, well, I bought all the stuff and now I don't have that. With a Hotswap board, you don't need it. I would highly recommend that you get one. We talked about that in our last episode. We highly recommend that you get one just in case you lift these pads, but you don't technically need one, and it can be great, if it just being able to experience a full build without having to worry about purchasing extra things. Or, if you're someone that you only ever decide you want to get hot swaps, you don't have to go buy a super fancy soldering iron. You really only need one, or even just access to one in case of situations where one of the sockets gets messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, on the other side of Hotswap, you have just your standard solderable PCBs. Mm-hmm. Benefits them. That's the first thing.
Stepped caps lock.
Just the stepped caps lock.
That's all you need. That's all you need is stuff.
This.
That's all you need. Because really, now this is an HHKB, but this I get some of my favorite PCBs right now. We're not sponsored, by the way, but One Up, not sponsored. Hands up. But One Up, this is their kind of wind keyless. I think it's called the Engson.
It starts with a T.
Yes, words are hard. I'm butchering that word, and I apologize. But One Up keyboards. This is the kind of this bottom 7U bottom row with a split backspace. They're PCB. So I have this is the Hotswap variant, and then there's actually a One Up PCB in this one of the standard PCB. One thing that is interesting, I know there is some discrepancy on whether or not it's good or not. These switches are actually installed with north-facing LEDs. Some people have said that there can be issues, but I have yet to run. But outside of Cherry, I haven't used anything, any switches or any keycaps outside of Cherry on these. But benefits, back to benefits. Customizability.
Yeah, you can have a lot of layouts. So I'll show this again. So Chewy has a quite customized layout here with this. That's not really possible on a lot of the Hotswap boards. So he's got stepped caps lock. He's got split backspace, and he's got the function here.
Short shift.
The short shift with the function right there, as well as a 7U spacebar. So if he were to use this on like a Hotswap board, he would be able to get everything about this layout except for the stepped caps lock.
Which is a big deal to me.
Yeah. See, whereas for me, I don't I'm not as big of a fan of the 7U spacebar. I prefer 6.25. So for me, especially with Hotswap boards, it's hard for me to find one that fits all of what I want from a 60% layout. I end up having to make sacrifices on the layout, which is fine when I'm ready to do it. But if preferred, I like to keep a standard bottom row with a short shift and regular caps lock and split backspace. So it's a little funky. Can't do that on a lot of the Hotswap boards, but you can on a standard PCB.
Yeah, and it's it's nice having that customizability. We're talking a lot about 60%. That's kind of one of the most popular Hotswap boards right now. And with 65% and up, or 60% or like 59% and below layouts, and really those percent numbers, I think honestly just kind of are strange because you can have a lot of keys on a 60%. But on the 60%, you can actually have on a custom PCB and actually have a Hotswap board too. KBD Fans does of having an arrow cluster, but you can have an arrow cluster for they don't have a lot of ISO enter support. So our friend Jay from Top Clack, probably not a big fan of Hotswap. But you do get, there are added benefits to having those, being able to do exactly what you want. And a lot of this community is making sure you build a keyboard that is exactly what you want. That's why I went with the custom PCB on this one, because honestly, I love this layout, but I needed my control. Honestly, my favorite layout is a Win keyless. I don't use the Windows keys that much, but TX60, TX keyboards, or Ken, if you're listening, love a TX60 with a Win keyless layout. But I wanted the step caps lock, and there will be something I get into here in a little bit whenever we start going on the downside of some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Another benefit of the standard PCB or solderable PCB that you have is no wobble.
That was what I was going to talk about.
Chewy's got a couple Hotswap boards he's used quite a bit, and different switches have different variants. A lot of times they have some wobble. Also a little bit about what's going on with some of these keys here.
So real quick, for the uninformed, I'm going to grab, here's a box. There are plate mounted, and then there are PCB mounted switches. And I'll try and get,
it'll take us, give it a second.
I'm impatient. Here, let it focus. There we go. So these are called 3-pin. You have the middle spot with the two connectors. That is a Kale bottom a lot of the times. And then if a 5-pin,
use the teal,
or even a cream. Cream will be probably the
easiest to see.
5-pin. They have these two little prongs, these little pins on the outside. And what those do is these actually secure into the PCB, which means in reality, you don't have to even use a plate with certain boards. You could just plug these right into the PCB, so you can have a little more flex. But when it comes to plates such as this, where we have the open bottom row, this has ISO enter support, which is great for releasing something for everyone. And the obviously split backspace, and this has a standard backspace support. But when you're using a non-PCB mounted, meaning the 3-prong, you get this weird wobble effect. Well, let me throw an S key on the top. But you get this weird, it'll start to get loose over time. And so these are just not, these switches, these are Holy Red Pandas. They're 3-pin on the bottom. They are not that, but they start to wobble, and they can start to kind of, just because they're not all the way in the PCB as secure as the other ones, And that was just something that kind of drove me crazy on a few. Now, if you're using a switch that does not have that, if it's got if it has, the 5 pins or whatever, you want to call that the PCB mount. PCB. It's not really an issue, but that's just something to look out for. That's something that drives me crazy. I mean, you can see the.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably one of the determining factors, other than the stepped caps lock, that moved you from using a Hotswap on your this antique brass board here, into getting it fully soldered.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also something to say about when you have a solderable PCB, you almost have it's almost like you're making it permanent in a way. It's like you're really committing to a layout or a switch choice. Whereas if you're using a Hotswap board, it is so easy to swap it out. It's not, I don't know. You don't have that same, I personally don't have that same feeling of like the commitment to the build.
Yeah. And we talked about tester board, with we haven't gone over this yet, but we'll get to it here in the next couple months. Modding switches. When it comes to lubing switches and spring swapping and breaking in new springs and breaking in the lube, sometimes it's great to put that on a Hotswap because you might not know exactly what board you want. And so, something like this board, these are Holy Jesus with 78 gram springs lubed with 3204. I had the switches in the tofu for a very long time. And I used them there to kind of really break them in. And then I actually put the Hotswap in there to like it a little more. And it was one of those decisions where I was like, this is the board I'm going with. I'm going to build it. I'm going to build it in this layout, and I know I will like it. For beginners, you might not know exactly what you like. It took me, I don't know, 8 to 10 months to realize exactly I've tried multiple layouts, and it took me a long time to figure out exactly what I like. And now that I've landed on it, I know that I can make that commitment. Not other people might, they might want to try something different, and that can be very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And as other downsides, we've talked a little bit about downsides of Hotswap, like you're stuck on a certain layout.
No stepped caps lock for most of them.
Yeah, which is a big thing for Chewy. But another one we haven't really touched on is kind of the issues of the sockets actually popping out. I know you had one that you had popped out accidentally. Basically what happens is if you press on a switch, if you're not on like a solid surface when you press it in, like if Chewy was to have this plate in the actual board already, and he was trying to push the switches in, there's a lot higher of a chance that the switch is going to pop out if something doesn't line up completely correct. It can happen. It's not super popular or super prevalent if you're doing it on a surface like this where it's flat and you can actually apply some pressure and not be worried about it. But if, say you're doing it in something like a tofu and you've got the board already, that has an integrated plate, so you've already got the board all screwed together and you're trying to put it together, you could damage it.
Yeah,
so
and
be careful.
That's if you notice that I took the board apart because there's really no reason not to. It's about 3 to 5 minutes and it can save you a whole lot of time, and it protects the PCB from being damaged. And so, a lot of people, we saw this with the M60A, a lot of people were just popping the PCB. They were popping the sockets and they were getting criticized, but in reality, they should have just been putting it down on something, or even down on like a hard surface, or even a lot of times, I'll sit there and watch something on my computer and I'll just hold my finger on it and then press it in. So just, be careful, but that is something that can happen.
It was funny that a lot of people were getting upset about that with the M60 because they specifically said in the online instructional stuff, it said, please be sure to put pressure on the sockets as you are pressing on them, as you're pressing switches in, so that way they do not pop off.
Yeah, and it's easy. Look at that. I just popped them in. I'm actually going to time myself real quick. I'm curious to know how fast I can pop these out.
How fast you can take apart.
I mean, I'm going to like kind of take my time and not go as fast as possible. Because if I wanted to go as fast as possible, I'd just throw it against the wall.
So what you're saying is you're not going to hit me in the face with a spring because you accidentally pull the top off?
I've done that with so many switches.
I've done that on a board. Like I did it when my TX60 build with on a standard PCB with the PCB mount legs, where they just get on the Gatoron switches or the Zeal switches, they just get so far stuck in there. When I went to pull it out, the top just popped off and hit me in the face with a spring, and I was like, "Oh, cool."
There you go. So we'll do a little pseudo live test for you on Zoom here. So because downsides of a custom PCB, what are they? How are they? Why are they? Why is Gamora?
Well, first off, I mean, the biggest downside of it is you actually have to solder. You don't know how to solder. That can be something that's kind of scary. We were talking about it earlier. Soldering irons are hot, 600 degrees plus. Some people go all the way up into the 700s to do their work. It can be dangerous. It can be scary to a lot of people, especially if you're newer. And there's a little bit more involved. No one likes to have to go in and buy, say you bought a tofu, you spent $200, you spent an additional, $30-$40 on some keycaps, and then all of a sudden now you got to spend another, $50-$60 on a soldering iron and solder, as well as all the other things that go into that. It's not as fun as just being able to pop those switches in and get going. The other thing is you can actually damage the board. If you're not as proficient in soldering, you can. Yeah, if you just put the solder.
I guess I'm proficient in soldering. I don't want to give off the wrong thing, but yeah, it's easy to mess. It's
easy to mess it up. I mean, if you're not someone who does it every day or does it, did it as like a job, you can have problems with it.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, the average. There's a lot of people in this community. Not everyone is fortunate enough or even cares enough to build more than maybe one or two boards. And if you find this right switch that you want right off the get-go, you might be able, you could say the one guy that got a tofu and then went, all right, I'm going to get a Jane V2 and got lucky, gets in on the buy, and then's like, cool, I'm done. They might not need the solder. They might not need... So they're only, or they might only need to solder it once. They don't want to pay someone else to do it. They have some soldering equipment, maybe from like another hobby, but you might not be a professional, and you don't want to ruin your entire keyboard experience because you accidentally screwed up a diode or messed up the controller.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing about solderable boards and solderable PCBs is that you don't get as much usability if you're someone who likes to change things up all the time. It's a lot more difficult, a lot more time consuming as Chewy just finishes his taking out and complete deconstruction of the board. So what was the time there?
2 minutes 35 seconds. I took my time. I looked up and I only threw one switch.
We had one switch get away.
It's down here. I just don't want to unplug anything.
Oh, okay.
There's also a keycap down there too, but yeah, I mean, it's that easy. 2.5 minutes.
Yeah,
2.5 minutes, and I now have the ability to build a whole new thing. And it probably took me a minute to unscrew the board. Yeah. And then boom, I have all the pieces I need to start a new build.
Yeah, and if you had switches ready to go, you'd be done. You're looking at 5 minutes and putting all the switches back in and putting keycaps on another couple minutes. You're talking about a half-hour process where I feel like half-hour process with desoldering is like maybe halfway done.
Maybe.
Especially and that's if everything goes right. Mm-hmm. That's because you're not having to, sometimes if if you solder the board and you put too much solder in and it gets all the way down to the base of the legs, like to the actual base of the switch itself, it can be really hard to get those out. So,
and one thing to note about Hotswap, they were just we're kind of final thoughts on these. I think they're great. I think Hotswaps are awesome. I think they're both great for what they are. I love having the ability to do a quick build with how many switches are out now, with how many the Holy Panda craze, and with the Zelio V2s kind of really taking the mech market by storm, and just a lot. Their linears are popping up left and right, and all the Xylent switches and all that stuff. There's so many switches that maybe you don't want to buy. Maybe you just get a TX60, or maybe you just get a Rama M60A, and maybe you don't want to buy 4 boards. Maybe you just want to have a handful of keycap sets and 10 different sets of switches, and you're good. And I'm sure there are people like that, and I commend them for having more
the restraint,
more restraint than I have, because that's something that is just, it's cool to be able to have that ability, that easily have that ability. I can't talk.
Yeah,
easily have that ability to swap out and have a completely different board.
Yeah, I think there's something beautiful in being able to swap it out and get a whole new feel, a whole new look, just like you do with keycaps. Basically, Hotswap opens it up to the same way of how with keycaps in 10 minutes you can go from one look to a completely different look. You can do the same thing with Hotswap in your switches and completely change the feel of the board. Mm-hmm. And if you're someone who has, like, for instance, if you went to a manufacturer and got different plates cut for your TX60s and you have multiple of them, you could swap from brass to copper, like the one that was up the other day, or like a carbon fiber, or even a TR4 or TF4. Is that what it is?
FR4.
FR4.
We got there.
That's close. Had the letters, had them messed up, but you could get there with it. So it's pretty.
Well, just don't want to. Awesome. We'll get to that in just a second. Last thing I'm going to mention, at least on my end, my favorite part about these Hotswap boards: access to stabs.
Yeah,
is huge. You can really, it can ruin your entire experience. It can ruin your day, probably your week, if you have a wire pop, or if you forgot to test them completely, or just something goes wrong. It's a 20-minute fix versus a 2-hour fix.
Yeah.
Being able to just, within 3 minutes, I had access to all my stuff. Man, call it 4 minutes, you can have access to being able to redo your stabs. And that's something that is almost worth it entirely. So.
Yeah, definitely super excited that Hotswap is more accessible and becoming more popular in the community. Hopefully we'll see some additional revisions to the actual sockets that might help with the wobble factor, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I don't really have an option of choice. I think personally at this point, I would probably choose a soldering PCB over a Hotswap. But if I'm going into a group buy and there's the option for both, right now I'm buying it. The fact that I already have some boards, I'm probably just going to be buying the regular because I'll know what switch I want. But for a newcomer, I can't stress enough how awesome that is.
Yeah.
I think the Leaf 60 just ran with one, and that's, right there you can get a, high tier board for, it's not top tier, but a solid mid to high tier board, Hotswap, and have an amazing experience.
Yeah,
So
especially because that had it had a fairly restrictive plate itself too, so you didn't have as many issues with wobble and something like that. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think if I was going into a group buy, like let's say, hey, obviously Polaris is one that we're both looking at going in on. If that comes out and it has an option for either, I'm either probably going to get standard or both.
mm-hmm.
I might get 2 PCBs and two plates. I feel like I always want to have one that's just fully soldered. Yeah,
big money.
No, but I mean, I like I said, I think there's something to be said about having a fully soldered board and how that makes you're committing.
Well, that and it's like the difference between doing surgery and building Legos, I guess. It's like when you solder a board, you're like, whew, I'm done. Like, yeah, it's a process where Hotswap it can kind of feel, not gimmicky, that's not the right word, but it can kind of feel like, yep, all right, I'm done. Like you can, it's cool, but you can kind of, I remember when I got the antique board, I used a Hotswap and I finished it and I was just like, all right, cool. Yeah. And then when I actually built it, I was like, all right, now I feel good about this. Like now I have committed to, this is my holy Jesus, holy panda, whatever you want to call it. This is my board. I've made the full commitment. So
plus I really like soldering.
Yeah.
I soldered for a long time. I did it with different guitar stuff. As we mentioned before, we were both musicians. So I had to do it in different aspects there, and I learned to enjoy it, and I enjoy doing it on keyboards. But yeah, I think we have our keyboard of the week, which we're actually going to bring up a picture of now.
Yep.
This is actually very similar to the board that I have, with one key difference.
And we're going to end the video. We're showing you this right about now.
Yeah,
we're gonna be rolling some B-roll. It's not even B-roll, but just
bring the picture up in the video. I'm gonna put my hand out and I'm gonna put the picture right above my hand,
and it'll zoom in. This is a TX60 HHKB style. So that I had the board I started out with that I took apart in less than 5 minutes, with a custom copper plate.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Custom copper plate. What key set is that again?
So I believe the alphas. Yeah, the alphas are Space Cadet.
Okay, that's what I thought. But
the mods, let's see, Modern Dolch Icon mods.
Okay, I was like, why does that look like Modern Dolch and Space Cadet at the same time?
So that would be why. So yeah, that's Modern Dolch on the outside. One favorite set 2019, favorite set 2018 GFK camping.
It's hard to say favorite set of 2019 when we're literally in May.
Even though the interest check was released last year. So, but yeah, so far Modern Dolch has been one of my favorite sets. I have seen Space Cadet, but I have not. I personally,
the hype on Space Cadet's kind of down now. It's selling closer to retail.
Yeah, which is good. We want to. Yeah. We don't want to see. I mean, we like that. People can potentially make a little bit of money, but that's a whole nother story.
Don't ask Dixie Mech for Space Cadet extras. He will let you know.
Or Modern Dolch extras.
Modern Dolch extras. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah, it's kind of funny. He brings it up every time I see him come in to basically any stream or anything. Someone asks him about it, and he's just like, "It's happening. You will know when it happens."
But yeah, and this was done, the plate, so the plate's custom, and it's got a really cool typing sound video. We'll post that video. I believe there's a typing sound. Yeah, there's a typing sound. We'll post that video down below as well. But yeah, it's beautiful. The cop, this is almost my stuff. He's got the GMK, not GMK, but the Novel Keys Serica Dark. Yeah, he's got nice wire, kind of matches the copper aesthetic. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful board.
Yeah.
So keyboard of the week, Mr. Koeno, Koenoe,
Sure.
Reddit user Koano, congratulations, keyboard of the week.
Keyboard of the week. You've inspired us to look into trying to see if we can get exotic metals cut into plates.
Absolutely. So,
but yeah, I think that's going to kind of wrap it up for us. We appreciate y'all stopping by. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be pushing some additional content in the next few weeks, some additional streams. So don't forget to follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/mechsondeck. Also, we have a special 100 subscriber giveaway coming up. Should be released hopefully later this week. I think it'll be later this week.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll figure it out.
But yeah, no, we're excited about the content. Anything else you would like to add, Senor Chu?
Senor Chu, thank you for joining me in my domicile. We got, you finally get to see the other half. I usually, recording this way, but you finally get to see the other half of everything that's here.
And you can appreciate his wife's Diva collection.
The Diva collection.
There's also one that's off screen.
I can't see the others. Some Mercy. We got the Adventure Time Get Up, some Dragon Ball Z, some of my favorite. These are my favorite pops.
There you go.
So,
if you want to play games like Overwatch with us, join us on Discord.
Absolutely.
We're in there pretty much almost every night, playing games, having a good time. Join our Discord, links below, and hang out with us.
Buy a Switch tester.